Right, in the last video we're looking at translation software which converts high-level languages, the ones that humans like, into low-level languages, or into machine code that the computer likes. We looked at the interpreter in the last video. The other piece of translation software that we need to look at that's converting high-level languages into low-level languages is called the compiler. So the compiler works differently to the interpreter. So we've got our source code here. What the compiler does is it takes the whole thing, takes the entire source code, and it converts it into the machine code. So it converts every single line, every single bit of code of your high-level language into machine code. Okay, so the compiler converts the whole of the source code into machine code in one go. Okay, and what it then does, it makes something called an executable file. So that's a file that you can give to someone else and they'll just double click on it and it will run. So you would use executable files all the time. So it's a little bit like the apps on your phone. So if you want to play Angry Birds, you double click on the app, and what you're doing is you're double clicking on an executable file that will run that code. So Angry Birds is an example of a compiled program. The executable file contains all of the machine code. Okay. Let's have a look at the advantages. So the advantages of compiled. They are pretty much the reverse of the advantages and disadvantages for the interpreter, but the first thing we can say is that they're fast. Really, really fast, because it doesn't need to be converted. When you run it, it's already in machine code. So already in machine code, where the interpreter has to convert each line every single time you run it. So it's already in machine code. Another advantage is the user can't see it. The user can't see the source code because it's no longer source code, it's ones and zeros. So it's near enough impossible for them to actually benefit from your original source code. All they have is the executable file. The executable file just contains ones and zeros. Let's finish that off there. Okay, disadvantages. Well, disadvantages. The main disadvantage, there are a couple. When you're developing your code, no errors. If there are any errors in your code won't compile. Okay, so that can be a bit of an issue, because with the interpreted program, whereas it's interpreting each line one after the other, so if there was an error here, these two lines would run. In a compiled program, any errors will stop the process, or you can't compile if there are any errors anywhere in your code. So the compiler will stop, you'll have to go back, fix the error, go back again and keep doing that. Another disadvantage, code can take a long time to compile. So if you're developing something, and when I say compile, you type your code, you press the compile button, you then have to wait. Sometimes this can take many minutes to happen. So imagine if this is a really long bit of code here, we hit compile, and we then find that there's an error somewhere. It starts compiling, there's an error. So we go back, we try and fix the error, we hit compile again. Let's say it works this time, but you might have to wait several minutes for the code to compile. So it's finished compiling, you then realize, actually, I want to change this, I want to change A to 2. You hit compile, many minutes later, it's compiled, you test it, it runs, and you think, actually, no, I needed to set B to 3. So the compiling process can take quite a long time, which is a bit frustrating when you're trying to develop your code. Whereas with the interpreter, that part is quite quick because it will just run each line of code. So there are a couple of advantages, a couple of disadvantages for compilers. One final disadvantage of the compiler that I will mention here is that all computers are different. They all have different, the machine code is different on lots of different computers, so Windows computers, Apple computers, Android computers. What that means is you have to have a different compiler for each computer. So the machine code will be slightly different on a Windows computer, it'll be slightly different on an Apple computer, it'll be slightly different on an Android computer. So we need different compilers for different computers. So that's compilers. I'll stop there. There's one more video. There's one more type of translator which is called an assembler, and that's the third. So there are three: interpreter, compiler, assembler, and I'll talk about assemblers in the next video. Thank you.